Well, welcome everybody to another edition of Tree Actions, the human forestry podcast. And joining us today is Mr. Norm Hall, who is a generational arborist. And, I think one of your claims to fame amongst several others, but one particular one that I think of is the whole porter wrap design and invention. So maybe you want to just tell us a little bit about where you came from and who you are in the tree world, Norm.
All right. Well, thank you for the invite. I appreciate it. The porter wrap thing is really Scotty's idea. Scott Profit's the brainchild. He got sick of doing Ring Around the Rosie.
Yeah.
So he thought there's got to be a better way to do this. So the first model, believe it or not, I'm pretty sure the porter wrap 3 is the 7th version of the actual porter wrap.
Wow. Yeah.
The first version came out to look like a 7. So it was a square tube with a round tube welded on it at about a 5-degree downward angle. And that didn't work. So we decided to put a tube opposite that one so it looked like a boat anchor.
Right.
And that was the porter wrap 1. And then we experience ropes during negative rigging operations. We experience the running end of the rope coming off the short leg.
Right.
So we decided to put that retaining L-shaped device at the top. And that solved that problem. That's the porter wrap 2. And then the porter wrap 3 came about through all of our innovations.
Right.
So
and what was your part in it, Norm? Was your part like welding pieces and as well as being the guy cutting the pieces, or all of that?
Yeah, I did all. I cut them, I shaped them, and I had the guys in my shop weld them together. I'm not a good welder.
Okay.
And I made all the pieces, cut them to fit, and then I had them weld them to the tubes.
Yeah.
And the porter wrap 2 design, I gave one to Rip, one to Ken, and they decided to run with that one.
Cool.
It is probably the most ubiquitous, arborist tool out there. Everybody knows what a porter wrap is. In fact, it's almost like the Band-Aid, right? Even if it's not a porter wrap, they call it a porter wrap, right? There's somebody's, this T-shaped looking thing that somebody cobbled together. Oh, that's our porter wrap. It's like, but
right.
It is probably the single most ubiquitous, other than rope. Almost every tree crew has a porter wrap. In fact, I've even met tree crews that don't climb, but they still have, they don't climb with rope. They still have porter wraps, which is amazing. But it's definitely an iconic tool. It's timeless, right? It's timeless.
Yeah.
I mean, everyone tries to make variations, and I think I saw one the other day. I don't remember what it was called, but I'm looking at this thing going do you know how many times I've seen the porter wrap tied to a tree upside down? And that's the porter wrap's about as basic as you can get. Now you want to hand a tree guy this thing that might actually require some thought. I'm like, that's not going to work. It's but it's funny. It's everywhere. I mean, I see it all over the world. All over the world. It's amazing.
Yeah, it's funny you should mention that, being tied upside down. I was watching a TV show on one of the History Channel or National Geographic Channel, and they showed the porter wrap, them using the porter wrap tied on upside down.
Yeah, it's amazing.
The instructions come with the device. Just
right. Well, the amazing
read them.
The amazing part, and maybe why it's a design triumph, is it still works upside down. Not as well, but it works. It's not like it doesn't work.
Yeah, absolutely. They had it working.
It just doesn't work as well. But it's absolutely amazing.
Which is part of its ingeniousness, which is part of its beauty. That you could screw it up and it won't let you down too badly. You know.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, how about it?
There's a definite, it's kind of like it was probably maybe one of the geniuses of the taut line hitch or some of the hitches out there, like, or the ones that make it like, even if you tie them wrong, mostly they'll grab, at least you won't completely fall.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, he won't completely.
It's one of the criteria for whether it survives or not.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean,
even the Blake hitch. You remember the first iteration of the Blake hitch that got promoted was the suicide. Where it was it was actually it was showcased as a new knot in an industry publication, and it had been tied incorrectly.
Right.
The old speed knot.
I went through all that. Yeah, I learned how to climb with a taut line, 2/2, and then John Hendrickson came back from a ISA convention and showed me the Blake's hitch, and man, world of difference between the two.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah. That's another person that would be an interesting person to have a chat with, is Mr. John Hendrickson. As far as the reactions to what's gone out in the tree industry. Mm-hmm. Norm, one of the things is, as we like to talk about the training aspect, and most of the people we've been talking about are involved in the training education part of it in one way, shape, or form. Maybe you want to just how did you get involved with training? What started it for you? How did it all begin? Where did it begin?
Oh man, let me think. We're talking mid '80s probably. The company I worked for, the Care Trees, they had their a maintenance division that did all our maintenance on vehicles, chippers, stumpers, etc. And they wanted to have a seminar, and so my name was out there. And so they asked me if I would mind doing a seminar on, they called it technical rigging. So I said, sure. What do we want to present? And so we made up kind of an outline, and we made a tree stand that would fit about a 8-inch tree. So we cut down a tree. It has a couple of 2-foot stubs on it we could use for rigging. And time came to do the show, and I was scared shitless. So fortunately, my dad was there, and he goes, Norm, you're a nervous wreck. What do we need to do? And I just said, I don't even know how to start. So he kind of calmed me down and told me, what to say. And so I think the thing with training is to know your topic and know how to present it, and know how to present it in a way that the people understand it. So it was only a 3-hour session. So I got through that, and most of the people liked what I did, and I started training for the Care Trees in 1988, and then pretty much became a full-time trainer in 1992. Care Trees had 7 offices in the Midwest, 7 offices in the Northeast, 3 in Philly, 3 in the Washington, D.C. area, and 2 in the San Francisco Bay Area. And I visited every office except for 1 in the Philly area. Okay. So I made my way around the country. It's my passion. I love to do it. I love to keep update on all the new techniques. This year, I'm a lead instructor for the Illinois Arbor Association. We presented 34 trainings. Wow. Mostly rigging. We will do climbing, rescue, both bucket and rope and harness, felling, chainsaw maintenance. Anything that has to do with the climbing arborist. That's what our domain teaches. We have 4 different domains, and our domain is the tree worker domain. Right. So I just have fun doing it. I love doing it. I like seeing people's reactions to what we present. I just want to keep on doing it until I get tired of doing it, and I don't see that happening in the near future.
Right on. So your introduction to the whole training world was through the company.
Yes, through the care trees.
Right. Okay. Cool.
And they were super supportive. John Hendrickson and my dad were very supportive. They played key roles in my career for sure.
That's interesting, because my connection to you through the training world came about through the Arbor Master connection. So how did that play into or where did that fit in? Because it sounds like you were involved in it before that.
The care trees hired Arbor Master Training to do some training for the production foreman of each office. There was 7 offices in Illinois. Then each office had a production manager, a production foreman. So, and we asked production foremen from all the offices all over the country to come to Illinois and come in for a 5-day training put on by Arbor Master Training. So a couple times Kenny came out. Most of the time Rip came out. And they kind of noticed my skill level, and they asked if I would mind helping them out in the training session. So that's how that evolved. They even had Kenny and Rip stay at our house in Illinois.
Okay. And did you
developed a very, very good friend? Even you did, right. Dwayne, right? You stayed at our house.
Yes. And what were we doing? Were we doing a Arbor Master thing at that time? I'm trying to remember why we were there.
It must have been some kind of training operation.
I think it might have been an open enrollment type situation, and we were just near where you were because a bunch of courses ended up running, just for any tree company that wanted to come attend or any person. But it kind of, I think their presence in the area, was initially started from connection with the care trees and you guys there. But it spilled over into, and that was something that, even the care trees at the time was supportive of was, even though they were competitors, they didn't mind. I don't know if your site hosted it or if it was even the Illinois chapter. I may have been involved at some point. I'm not sure.
That was a long time ago. I don't remember exactly what happened there, but I think you're right. I think it was an open enrollment type thing, and people from.
Because I remember Ken and Rip in early Arbor Master days. They did a lot more like seminar style stuff than straight up training courses. I think, to kind of until they got a foothold. So, like when I first got involved, that would have been late '90s. I think my first exposure to Arbor Master was probably just a seminar, like a 2 or 3 day seminar. Basically, it was pseudo hands-on, but it wasn't necessarily like their 4-day training course and stuff, which I took later. So maybe it was something like that. Might have just been. Yeah, that's probably why it all blends together. It was a little bit of everything.
It was the early '90s, and hopefully we'll maybe be able to get Rip on at some point or Ken, but where they what happened is they made a connection with Husqvarna at the Paul Bunyan show. There was a marketer there with Husqvarna that was watching them do what you're talking about, Tony. And they would demonstrate a little, and the person said, "Listen, you guys you're on to something here, but you're basically just showing off. Like and they had called the company Arbor Master Training already, but said you're not training. You're just showing off." And they wanted to get involved, so that's when they introduced them to. I don't think it was Soren, but Soren might have been part of it in the very beginning. But Tim Ard specifically, and when they met Tim was the one that helped them put their seminar model into a 3-day curriculum, and chainsaw became a more significant portion of it, which it hadn't been prior. And Tim always taught that for the first, like when I took it. Tim was the chainsaw instructor. Ken and Rip didn't teach chainsaw, and
exactly.
And then they formed a partnership and a company that lasted for a few years before Tim and Ken, I guess, couldn't always see eye to eye, so they parted ways. And that's the whole Arbor Games. That was part of that process as well. That was, and it was connected through Husqvarna, Tim Ard, and Forest Applications was part of it. There was a strong alliance between the three. But and the chainsaw curriculum was really Game of Logging's chainsaw program, or a very close resemblance of that. Yeah.
That's exactly how I remember. Tim Ard did the chainsaw portion.
Yeah.
And I made the national finals in Nelsonville. I don't remember the year, but
nice.
Tim Ard was part of that as well. And as a matter of fact, I just saw Tim this past fall.
Nice.
He invited me to one of his seminars that was pretty local in Illinois. So I went and saw him present for half a day. He's still on the ball game, man. He's the best chainsaw instructor out there.
I agree. I stay connected with Tim also, and we chat periodically. And I learned so much from him, and I still credit much of my chainsaw.
Absolutely.
Where I got in chainsaw was so much due to Tim, which and he's so humble and great to still talk to. He's more than willing to talk. He has a true heart of a teacher. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. That's what I love about him. Yeah.
I mean, really, you think about it, like Tim's chainsaw, the way he teaches, everything else is just a variation on his theme because you learned it from him. I learned it from you. It's, I've heard him speak and talk, and I haven't done a course, but I keep meaning to go down and do one with him. But it's just, I use the same words that he's using. That has to be a direct line, right? It's like that's right through. Yeah. And I remember the Arbor Games, Norm, because that's when I first met you, because I took part in the North American finals at Stevens Point, and I think that was 98. I got a plaque around here somewhere. And you were like judging the work climb, I believe, right?
I was.
So it would have been like
Mike
me, and Peter Donzelli was there, and Dan Krause.
Well, Pete won that sucker.
And
he won it.
I'm trying to think.
He took third.
Yeah. Oh, did he? I thought Pete won.
I think Dan won, if I remember correctly, overall. But that was the first time. And I'm like, here I am, like, like I'm second generation, but I'd only been climbing as a professional for like 5-6 years. And Norm's watching me climb. I'm like, oh, God, this is going to be terrible.
Come on.
I learned, in those moments, like when I learned so much more than not that things went bad, but I learned so much more just because of the skill level that was there, and it just, it was a phenomenal opportunity for me. And I think that's what really got me kind of hooked on doing the tree climbing competitions, and then my association through knowing Ken and Rip, and then Ken and Rip being involved with the ITCC. Like in 2000, I went and volunteered. It was in Baltimore, so it was only a couple hours south of me here. So, and from like 2000 to, for 21 years straight, I volunteered. I missed 1 year, 19 years consecutively, 21 years total. And,
wow, good for you, Tim.
But it's, it's fun to talk about this history because people often ask, like, well, how do you become a trainer? It's like, you can draw a straight line through that, like Tim, Ard, Arbor Master, Dwayne, Arbor Games, ITCC, it's really a straight line, and it's fun to see that history and how it is. I'm not sure if it's possible to do that anymore. Things have gotten a bit convoluted along those lines, but I do remember that was a seminal experience in my arboricultural career, meeting you there and going out there and competing. And it was just, it was phenomenal.
My
nothing beats at a ITCC. I did it I judged for 14 years.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Still wish I could do it, but there's people out there better than I know.
I'm guessing. I guess that's the case with me because they just stopped asking, so I'm okay.
Yeah, exactly. That's what happens.
I guess so much better, so whatever. That's fine. I had a great time doing it. It was a lot of fun.
When things change, you had to. They got more organized, and then you had to fill out a form, and you had to do it online, and everybody had to do it, including all the old guard, and it just felt like, okay, you know what? It's time. It's reaching another stage. It's a new era. I'm not going to fill out my volunteer form. I've been doing this for however many years now. I'm supposed to start filling out a form every one and tell them who I am and where I want to be involved. It's like, I think it's time to move on.
Right.
And not in a bitterness way or anything. It was a sign, it was a sign.
Well, I mean, what I think I love the most about it was just the community, right? So my last 5-6 years of volunteering for ITCC, I was really just going to see people. That's really the only place I got to see them and hang out with them. And then as those people started to fade and not come around, I'm like, just why am I here? So it ran its course. It was a lot like a big old tree for me, right? It started slowly, it picked me up and it flourished, and then it kind of declined slowly. And I still help out on the chapter level. And, if anyone asks, I'm more than happy to do it because I love it. I absolutely love it. But it's funny how that there's no way to be no direct route to be an arboricultural trainer in arboriculture. You just have to kind of hang around till someone gives you a job.
Yeah, I still am our chapter comp as well. I chaired our chapter comp for I'm thinking 18 years, and I'm down right now. Both know Don Apollo and Eduardo Medina. They're co-chairing it now, but I'm still helping them out. It's still a lot of fun for me. I enjoy doing it immensely.
Yeah. Norm, the last course I remember us being together on was a kind of an advanced rigging course. It was rigging level 2, a course that I'd developed for Arbor Master, I guess you could say. And we were in Michigan City with at the Dumkowskis. They were hosting.
Oh yeah.
I think that was the last time that we actually trained together, or you were there as a senior student for sure. Do you remember that?
Memory. Absolutely, I do remember that. Yeah, I was there taking the course.
Okay,
Sean Gear was there,
right? And Sean Gear and myself were delivering it. That's correct. Yeah. And it was one of the first deliveries. I think it was the second delivery of rigging level 2, which was a course that I cooked up. And there was a couple courses I cooked up that Rip got a little befuddled with. What the heck is this? But then after it became somewhat popular, he would get more encouraged by it. But Sean and I did the first few, and that was, I think, the second delivery. And we would, we had the dynamometers, and we'd kind of go into whatever kind of came up. And remember, that was the first time we tested the droop line.
Was it? That was the first time in that. That was a white pine, right?
Yeah, remember we had this thought about what would happen if. And
I remember that.
So Tony, what we did do you remember how we came up with that whole idea?
Are you asking me?
Yeah.
I have no clue how we came up with that idea. No, I don't remember.
Well, we were trying to figure out ways
to tree and set the droop line.
Yeah, we were trying to figure out ways to reduce force on the spar pole. And so, Tony, what we came up with was, what if we dropped it into a slide? How you don't drop into a tight slide line or a speed line. Well, this was a loose speed line that was slack enough but tight enough. So it was tight enough that the piece wouldn't hit the ground, but it was as loose as it could possibly be. So it had a speed line with a droop in it. But the other thing we did different is, instead of anchoring it lower than the rigging point, we anchored it equal to or above the rigging point to an adjacent tree. So basically the piece would come down and into a droop, hence the droop line term. And then we put dynos on both things, and it was one of the beginnings of and we would see a dramatic reduction in force. But we were missing the bending moment component. But even not knowing that physics of that yet, Sean would be up on the spar on that particular one, and there was a lot of shake or jiggle. Now, while we had lower forces at the rigging point that we were reading on the dyno, what he was feeling on the spar was because it was side pull, right? There was enough side pull there that it just didn't feel. And so it wasn't, we abandoned the idea relatively quickly. I don't know if we did it, even if we demoed it again after that. But we did it a couple times at a couple courses, and we're like, And it was very experimental, anecdotal. We got into this yesterday, Tony, talking to Thor. But, that's how, but it never caught on as a technique because it just didn't quite feel right.
It evolved into the vertical speed line, right? Just connect it to a rope and drop it.
Yeah.
Right. And it was probably an iteration of that, certainly we never did think of. And, that's been, that's not a bad little technique, actually, especially for keeping things from kicking out all the time.
Yeah, it works. It works really. It's one of those techniques that once you see it, you're like, I wish I'd have known that 10 years ago. Like, really, like I could have used that so often. And although, fortunately, now in my line of work, like when it involves wood like that, it's usually a crane and a lift. I'm not complaining. It's all good, but it's funny how it's me and a set of spikes and a saddle rigging vertical speed line, big chunks of wood, or mercifully in the past.
And that's another thing, Norm, that I think you were probably one of the first people that I talked to and got to know that had what I would consider extensive experience using cranes for tree work.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, my first crane job was 1986.
Wow.
And my dad was there. He took some pictures. Actually, one of my spar pictures made it on the cover of Journal of Arboriculture in April of 1987 issue. But that was my very first crane job. John Hendrickson spent a considerable amount of time there coaching. Actually, I tag teamed that tree with my brother. So we had a small crane. It was only an 18-ton crane. But one of us would go out and set the chokers while the other one would come back and do the cut. And then when we were done with that limb, the one who made the cut would go out and set the chokers on the next limb. And the other guy would make the cut so we wouldn't burn ourselves out. But it was a very, very eye-opening experience for me, for sure.
And were you guys, like the whole concept of balancing and was that already something you were working on?
That didn't take place until a couple of years later. We were using wire rope chokers, and we were trying to set the choker at the balancing point as much as we could. We got pretty good at that, just using one wire rope choker. And when it came down to spar sections, we were setting the choke opposite the boom so the crane operator could pull the piece over. And let's see, we had a tree that had blown over onto a customer's house in the North Shore, about a 33-inch red oak, and it had from the root plate to where it was leaning on the house was 29 feet. There was no crane access, so we had to remove about an 18-inch elm tree and take out a wooden fence to get a 25-ton crane in there. And that's when I came up with the first balancer. So we had to take this pick in one piece. It was going to be about 30 feet long, and we estimated it to weigh 9,000 pounds.
Wow.
So the crane operator two-parted his line just in case, and I made a balancing sling out of 1-inch hollow braid. I don't know if it was 10X or Yale X. And it worked out very, very well. The crane operator says, "I want one of those." So yeah, that was actually my first experience using a balancer, and then the balancer evolved into spider legs or just eye slings.
Yeah. And
I don't remember what it was, but that had to have been mid '90s, maybe early to mid '90s.
Yeah. And when did splicing become part of your repertoire, the knitting parties, as we affectionately call them?
I was a Boy Scout, and my dad was one of my leaders. Since I'm second generation, my dad knew how to splice 3-strand. I started splicing 3-strand rope when I was 13 or 14 years old. And then when they came out with New England came out with safety blue braided,
Right.
And Scott Prophet learned how to splice that from, what was that guy's name that worked at New England? Howard Wright.
Oh, right. Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
And then Scott came, when Scott and I were still working together, he would come to my house, I would come to his house, and we'd do trainings for the care trees. He showed me how to splice up safety blue braided, and I just caught the bug, and it's just, I love splicing. I still love splicing. It's something I really like to do. So, let's see, then the arbor store side of the care trees was buying rope products from Sampson and Yale. So I bugged the Yale guy to teach me how to splice hollow braid. And he said, I'll tell you, I don't have time today, but the next time I'm in town, I'll let the sales reps know at the arbor store, and I can show you then. So he taught me how to slice hollow braid, and it's evolved since then. I've learned how to splice double braid, learned how to splice class 2 ropes. It's something I really enjoy doing, and the quality has to be there because people's lives depend on your splices.
Yep. Yep. Yep.
So attention to detail is a must.
Right.
I've seen a lot of bad splices out there, and it's actually, some of them are kind of scary.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, for real. For real. No.
And where did like, how do you feel that splicing played a role in the whole arborist? Like, it sounds to me like you were splicing rope. I know maybe for your crews or something already long before it was even purchasable then. Like, you were integrating it into the workplace before it was something that people could really buy.
Absolutely. Yeah, it all had to be approved from the safety committee. And actually, I was a member of the safety committee at a time, and none of them knew what I was talking about. So it had to be approved by the chairman of the board, John.
Right.
So yeah, it was. Then we had. So just make sure that you're doing it according to what the manufacturer recommends. So I said, "Don't worry, I know people's lives depend on it. That's a big thing for me."
And
I was doing I was doing all the Midwest splices at the time. Yeah.
Wow. Did you and Stanley ever splice together?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, we enjoyed our company tremendous. Actually, Stanley even stayed at our house. Okay. He was doing a seminar at the Arbor Supply Store in Wheeling, Illinois, and he jammed with Corinne's son.
Right.
He played guitar. Corinne's son played the keyboards. And, I was downstairs splicing, and Stanley goes, "I got to go to the restroom." So the restroom, my wife was in the restroom on that floor, so we went upstairs to use the restroom upstairs, and he heard Tyler jamming on his keyboards. And so then I hear this guitaring and keyboarding, and I'm going upstairs, and there they are jamming in the bedroom. So Stanley, we're supposed to be splicing. He just gave me that funny look, how he does. He goes, "You just kept on jamming."
Yeah. Oh yeah, that's definitely with Stanley for sure. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
So how do you like? I mean, I'm curious about your perspective on how splicing moved into mainstream arboriculture. Like, what was the progression? How did that happen from your viewpoint?
You have to look at how knots reduce rope strength, and how splices only reduce rope strength 8 to 10%, depending on the rope fiber and the splice. So that was the big component for me, is how much it does not reduce rope strength.
But how did it get to where it is today from basically a company that had a very stringent vetting process, and you were practicing your due diligence by having a committee, and saying, yeah, we're keeping our eye on this and making sure you were following manufacturers, to like today now where, it's just commonplace. Everybody uses spliced materials. Like, how do you see that progression? How did that happen? We're talking like from the 90s to now. What are we talking? 30 years. Yeah. And it's gone from very much obscurity to full on mainstream.
That's the thing I'm talking about. Is I've seen some very scary splices even during competition gear inspections. During competition gear inspections, the splices now are supposed to be tagged. And if you find a splice that's not tagged, then they say, oh, that the tag came off. I said, well, you can't use it then. And then they get all upset, said, well, what am I supposed to climb on? I said, well, see if you can use somebody else's rope. But yeah, that's what I'm talking about. The splices nowadays have to be done according to manufacturer's recommendations. There's a lot of people out there splicing their own ropes. And is that right? Yes and no. It'll save them money, but are they doing it according to manufacturer's recommendations? We do not know that unless we can tear the whole splice apart.
Right.
So the progression is there. People are doing it, but are doing it according to manufacturer recommendations or specifications. We don't know. That's why they're with the tagging each splice.
Right. I remember, a gentleman that was with Samson Ropes at the time when we were working with them. He was and he wasn't from the arborist industry. He came from more the sailing side of things. But he found it curious how we were so adamant about the credentialing of not only the splice, but also the splicer. And the reason he found it odd is he said like who credentials the knot tire and approves the knot, and he said it was his opinion, which I found fascinating, that you could screw up a knot probably easier than a splice. And he would way rather climb on a splice than a knot. and because a knot to him was like, whoa, how do you know what knots are what? And it was an interesting discussion, because he thought, why is everybody so worried about, having it done properly? Obviously anything done needs to be done properly, but he said, you can mess up a knot real easy and it's got to hold your life up. And I always found that curious. I was wondering what your thoughts would be on that whole concept. Like, your knots aren't tested and approved, and maybe the knot tire is or isn't, I don't know. And the rope manufacturer certainly doesn't approve or disapprove knots. So what do you do with that parallel? Like, why not splice? Why splice not?
Right. What I'm seeing is it all comes down to cost. And we're training in Illinois now. We're training more and more municipalities, and what we're finding is there's a lot less training going on with municipalities than there is with the commercial side. So, getting these municipal arborists to tie, simple stationary bowline. It's like pulling teeth sometimes. Right. So we tie stationary running for rigging. Let me think. Double clove, cow hitch, and timber hitch. Those are the 5 knots we teach in our rigging course. And at the end of our course, we do have a practical test. They have 1 minute to tie each one of those knots. And believe it or not, the knot that they struggle with is the stationary bowline. They can tie the stationary bowline, or they can tie the running bowline, but they can't tie the stationary bowline for some reason, because a lot of them are using the running bowline for pulling down trees and rigging limbs, and they can't tie the stationary bowline. So it's a struggle for them. How do you know that they tied it right when they're in the tree? Well, we have binoculars. We watch them. We actually watch them tie the knot from binoculars.
Right.
So we can tell if it's right or wrong before they rig the piece down. And then we have a coach up in the tree usually with them while they're doing their first couple of rigs. So the coach can coach them in how to properly tie that knot. But on the job, I mean, I'm sure everybody's heard of knots failing. So was it tied properly? Did it, work itself undone from not being properly set? Yeah, we don't know. Even some very well-known arborists on Instagram are showing fails.
Right.
So, and we don't know if it was properly tied or properly set or what.
Yep. Yep.
I would think the big difference, I think, knots is it's easier to inspect a knot than a splice, right? For properness. And I think the other thing too is to, like, especially when you get in almost any splice is difficult to do and master. Like it takes some time, especially you start getting some of the double braid splices, the berry splices. I mean, when I first started splicing, I mean, I made a ton of dog toys because, the incomplete splices, the dog would play with them, but it takes a long time. And I think that's the other thing too. Like you can learn a knot in a relatively, manageable time frame, and it can be inspected and you can tie it repeatedly, whereas splicing takes a certain skill level. And if you don't have that skill level and then you kind of start to cut corners, then the splice is totally wrong, but it's hidden. You can't really see. And so I think there's some inspection properties. And I think what really drove the splices is when we got away, when the split tail system came in and we needed, an anchor knot, or we were anchoring with the end of the climbing line and the knot was in the way. And then we switched to the split tails. And I think that's what really drove the splices and climbing to be much, much more in demand, because it just streamlined that split tail system, no matter what system you're using, but especially, like the French prussics and all those things. It works so much better with the splices. I think that's what drove it. And I agree with you, Norm. I still see some sketchy, hand splices, but I see even more sketchy stitch splices because people don't quite understand, when you get a mechanically stitched splice, I mean, that's done on a press, and those two pieces of rope are pushed together under a great deal of force. And it's actually that force of them two pieces being put together that holds it, not the stitches that go through. And these guys are hand stitching them and it's like, oh my God, like, you can't be doing that. You can't be doing it. And their load testing is, it hasn't broke yet, but we've been saying that forever, but it's really interesting to see the evolution of it. And I think that split tail and switching to those types of system is what really drove the demand for splices. And I think that's what really made them kind of proliferate and make them very popular.
Yeah. And not only that, that system change was, like a very significant change in configuration, I guess you could say, like separating off, not using the tail of a knot to tie to the fall, which in and of itself secured that tail. And when you left it loose, you didn't need it anymore because you used a separate tail, a separate piece of rope to form your hitch. All sorts of wonderful things opened up. You could use the other end, you could pass over obstacles easier without untying. But then those knots, for me, I was taught to use a bowl and not a clove hitch. And there's been different terminations over the years that I guess it was cultural or what company you worked for, whatever they used to tie the snap hook onto the climbing line and left a long tail. Even I remember it was a big deal how long the tail was. I had a measuring technique, how long what was the perfect length, to leave out of your knot to form your hitch with. Like that was like discussionary material, man. Like, how long do you leave yours, and how much hanging out of your knot, and I can get a good throw with this length, and then sometimes I'll tie it tighter in the tree when I'm going out on limbs. Like, that was nouveau shit, and then suddenly, someone cuts it off and ties it separate. Like, what the hell? And now we need a determination. We needed an end, an end that wasn't fat and bulky, that were your beaner, because then carabiners came in and you can't have them flopping and sliding and rolling all over the place. And And then people started falling off the damn bowline because it was just, well, I'm using the bowline, I'll just tie the hole a little tighter. And well, now that, and the knot became short, the tail became shorter because he didn't want it hanging around. Well, you work a bowline not too much and the damn thing just unties. So, splices just made all that so much easier, and, yeah. And, I think there was a real surge too when we started using the smaller cordage like the 10Xs for tails, because it was hollow braids is so much easier to splice. So, speaking to your comment, Tony, about how long it takes to perfect a splice, which I agree with, but the hollow braid is one of the simplest and easiest. And, if I'm thankful at times that most people don't know how easy it actually can be, because there might be a heck of a lot more crappy splices going on out there, particularly with hitches. But, that's one thing, Norm, that I feel has been lost, is the art of the I tail, because that was a rope tool that was more than just a piece of rope with eye splices in it. The fact that the berry would overlap and basically create a hollow braid I, or a double braid I, because the core was vital. Because an I that had a properly buried, overlapped berry, which created a core, that created a whole different type of hitch than when you had that little hollow section near the middle or a lump in the center. And the same thing happened with stitching. I'm sorry, it's not the same tool anymore with a stitch because it doesn't have that filler in it. I'm curious what you think about that.
So you're asking about the difference in doing I&Is with double braid, the berry?
Not with double braid, with hollow braid, but when you leave the core in there and you overlap it just right, in essence, it is now, the hollow braid becomes a double braid, and when you tie it, and even when you hold it, the hand is completely different. It doesn't flatten the way it does if it's left, if the berry isn't completed, so to speak, or if it's stitched.
Okay, gotcha. So you're talking about the hourglass effect in the middle.
Yes. Yeah.
If they don't. Okay. Got it. Yeah. It's, the problem with polyesters is they stretch, and you could have that perfect butt end in the middle when you're, first complete the splice, but then as you use that product, it stretches a little bit, and then that, creates that hourglass effect. So how do you overcome that? You really don't.
Well, Stanley used to overlap it somehow where it would instead of like this, it would do this. When you pulled it, it would go like that. And I remember him talking about that being a real art.
Right. Yeah, that's takes a little bit of experience, a little bit of time to perfect how you do that. But even the experienced splices are going to have that hourglass effect over time. That's why they're coming up with these a lot less non-stretchy rope fibers.
Right.
Stuff like HLC is a double braid.
Yeah,
but there are other products out there that are not nearly as stretchy as products like 10X, ELX,
right,
Near-X.
Well, and the aramids, or not the aramids, but the heat resistance that became, it's interesting how they became a lot more important because now, and with the advent of the new hitches, we were just sliding a lot faster.
Oh, yeah.
Creating a lot more heat in a climbing system than we used to, right? And all of a sudden, and using thinner cordage. So all of a sudden, a reality became of melting through your hitch.
Yeah, that always bothered me at like tree climbing competitions years ago, when after the tree climber descended off the work climb, he had to burn down to hit the bullseye. And then they collected his hitch cord and said, man, this thing is burnt to a crisp. We're going to deduct some points for that. I said, well, how am I supposed to come down and land on the bullseye? So, yeah, that's just going to happen, with the polyester and the class 1 fibers. There's no way around that.
Yeah. Low melting point. You bet.
Absolutely.
And now you see, the push almost away from the hand splices into the stitch splices. And I think that's coming from, because the downside of the berry splice or the hand splices, you always have that thick part right at the throat. So you can only work so close to that, especially with the hitch cord. So when you start to get into those stitch splices, and it occurred to me as we're talking that, you talk about like the two big changes in the last, 30, 40 years, right? We went from basically an open or closed systems to open systems, right? So, and that was really a change in configuration. The forces really didn't change. And then you flash forward 20 years and we go from moving rope to stationary rope, and the configuration is the same, but it's a change in forces, right? So I wonder if the next change is going to be a change in configuration and forces. I don't know, right? But when those changes came about, I remember because I've started as a professional arborist right on the cusp of like split tail it had its foothold in, but it was still very new, right? It was, it was still, you'd go out and show some guy a Blake's with a split tail and they'd be like, oh my God, like you handed him fire. And then you put a pulley underneath it and you were some kind of god. But, when those changes happened, and I don't know quite why they happen slower over time. I guess it has to do with technology and social media, and they were passed down from one person to the next. But when the stationary rope stuff came in, it seemed to happen much faster, and it almost seemed to create zealots, like the people that are really big proponents of it. It was almost like, oh my God, if you're not climbing this way, you're somehow backwards or old school. And it's like, no, not really. I mean, we've been doing this work for quite a long time, with our Blake hitches, and we've been relatively safe. Not saying system one's good or bad, but it's just, and I'm not quite sure how that happened. I think it really came down to the speed of it happening, because for split tails to kind of infiltrate took 5-6 years, ultimately till it was almost common. But, when you got into some of the newer techniques like the rope wrenches and things like that, they happened very quickly. Like within 1 to 2 years, they were just all over them. And it was interesting to watch that, I'm fortunate in my career to have seen both, right? I think I don't think I'd have noticed it if I'd have gotten in 5 years later. I don't think I'd have noticed the change as much.
And I think it's important to remember, well, at least for myself, that my age and generation change shifting as well. Like, what would I have been like if, when I was in my mid-20s and the wrench came out? Where would I be sitting on the scenario? Like the Blakes didn't exist when I started climbing either. And what, I find it funny because people say, well, I even teach the Blake's hitch. It's like, well, it's not really even the oldest, right? Like the taut line's actually been dusted, like it's so far back that it isn't even, and I remember it was standard curriculum in the Arbor Master curriculum about how with 3-strand rope, the taut line hitch doesn't roll. And it's true. On 3-strand rope, the taut line does not bind up and get tight. That only started happening with braided line, and that whole discussion of how the rope you use changes everything, and even its braid can change how a device or a knot or a hitch will operate. And that was the only reason the Blake's was so great, because it didn't get so frickin' tight. Right. Whereas the taut line, ever since ArborPrex became the way to go, all of a sudden everyone was struggling with these tight hitches that, you got the old safety guys that all they ever knew was 3-strand. It's like, well, you got this nice fancy rope and you're bitching about the taut line. Never had any problem with it. But, they didn't try climbing on it. Right. And why do you need the Blakes for? Whereas if you go and tie it, and I tested this, I had DJ I was doing a presentation. I asked him for help and I said, get some 3-strand. And he went and he bought the stuff and he tied it. He said, Dad, holy crepe, on 3-strand rope, this taut line setup is actually pretty nice. It slides really nice and smooth and it doesn't get all tight. And, it's really fascinating. And, we just did a climbing review of our climbing stuff, and the taut line is gone. Like, we don't even talk about it, and yet we act like we're paying homage to the history by talking about the Blake. And I didn't say anything because I feel like I'm just that old, but there is, the Schwabisch, the Schwabisch is a variation of the taut line. Really?
Yeah, it is.
It's all it is, or the other way around. I don't know which, but I've always, when I did still teach climbing, which I haven't done now for several years, I would always make that connection. Like, it wasn't, you could get someone that was really old school on a taut line to actually try a Schwabisch because it looked kind of like a taut line.
Yeah, I get them confused too. I don't know if it's the Distel or the Schwabisch, but one of the two, yes.
The Distel, the one comes out the same side, and one is the opposite side.
I think
Schwabisch. Distel. Is it the Distel, Tony?
I think the Distel comes out opposite sides.
Yeah, so it's the Distel that's like a taut line.
The Schwabisch is essentially just an offset Prussic, right? An offset
Correct.
English
Right.
Prussic.
Yeah, that's right. So it is the Distel, sorry. But I always found it fascinating, and it was Pete, I think, that showed me that, and he said, check this out. Because you tie an old style taut line, and you take that end and you tie it down, and you've got a 2/2 Distel, which slides. Yeah. But if you take 3/1, even on half-inch rope, it holds. Just boom, just like that.
Well,
go ahead.
The other magic part about taunt lines was you could tie that stuff one-handed when you were practiced, right? You could reach out there and tie it with one hand. Now, I don't know why you'd want to do that, but sometimes you would do that.
Hey, man, it's tree work, It's like, man, there might be times. I mean, that was a big thing with the bowling too, right? You could tie it around yourself with one hand.
Right.
I know you could. And again, why I don't know, but it was one of its attributes that would be discussed.
For what? Oh, well, you did it when you got shamed out of wearing your chicken strap. I mean, your lanyard, and then you couldn't let go. But,
yeah.
Well, I think it was a benefit because you were in that system before the split tail. You were tying and untying that knot a good deal. You just were. I mean, it was not uncommon to, untie that knot out quite a few times in the course of your climb and have to retie it. So it was, being the ability to do it one hand, whether you're hanging on with the other one or not, was beneficial.
Well, I mean, I would say there was a fair bit of that. You were actually holding on to something while you tied in, and that was the reason it was nice to do it one-handed.
Mm-hmm. I wouldn't know anything about that. I will neither confirm nor deny that comment.
Yeah. True. I guess I would have to agree on that one. Then like advancing your rope and moving through the tree, like hoofed man. Like, I mean, for me, I was taught you clip the rope to your belt. You had your tail set for the right length, and before you cut anything, you tied in, but you got up as fast as you could. So either you'd get a boost, or they'd throw a ladder up. You climb the first set of limbs, and you'd hustle your ass to the top. We just climbed it.
Yep.
And, if someone was in your way, it was discouraged to stop and cut on the way up because, you weren't tied in. But it was, I remember when I first saw throw line and setting from the ground, it's like, what, just get up there and tie in, and that's how I was trained. And then you got to the top, throw your lanyard around if you had it, and throw your rope over a union and tie on. Now you're good. Now you're good to start working. So it was that moment of each climb began with that just get up there, hold on tight, and climb away. But there was no. I wasn't tied in for the entire ascent. For a lot of years, I did that. And that's how everybody did it. I didn't know any different. I didn't know that. I just didn't know any different. And I never was taught on a taut line myself. I was taught 2 under, up a half hitch, over a half hitch. Or over So it wasn't 2 over and 2 over like the way a taut line was. You tie 2 wraps up and a half hitch, and then again over top of it, kind of like the way you'd finish a clove.
Wow.
And that was it.
Okay.
And that was it. And it never got tight, and the tail never rolled. And it was on a marine braid, double braid, thick, heavy line. Like it was a half inch, but man, the sucker was thick. It was strong stuff. But that's and a snap. We were advanced. We had snaps because like some guys wouldn't use the snaps because that was, you just tied to the belt. Like if that was the proper way. You were getting real fancy if you had a clip that you could unclip it from your belt.
Yeah, right. So you were back in those days when people were actually tying the rope to their harness with no snap.
Yep. Yeah, tying it right to the D-ring, yeah.
When I first started climbing, we were climbing on half-inch manila. And we would have to get a new rope probably every 4 to 6 months because of the rock decay.
Wow.
I was one of the only ones using a non-locking snap at the time. There were no such thing as locking snaps.
Right.
And we were climbing even without a lanyard. So all we had on our harness, we were still painting our cuts. So we had a paint pot with a brush,
Yeah.
a handsaw. Some of us used a handsaw and a scabbard. Some of us just tied a wire around the handle. It was a Fano number 8 and clipped it to our harness. And then just clipped our rope to our harness, and we would ascend up the tree, free climb, never tied in.
Yeah.
So those are some scary days. I don't remember when I used a lanyard for the first time, but I climbed many, many years like that.
Yeah.
And the first time I used a synthetic rope, it was a synthetic 3-strand. And a rope manufacturer brought this 3-strand to one of our climbing camps at the Morton Arboretum. And he was selling it at a very, very low price. So my dad bought 3 of them. And I was one of the first ones to check it out. And I did notice that it was a lot slipperier and the taut line hitch was indeed walking out. So that's when we decided to use a stopper knot. But yeah, with sisal or manila rope, the taut line hitch really didn't walk much at all.
No.
It wasn't until we started using synthetics that it started to walk and elongate. Yep. That's when we started using the stopper knots. I can't even tell you when the first time I used a locking snap. I climbed on non-locking snaps for many, many years.
Yeah.
And I don't think there were even D-rings on the side of our harness for a lanyard, from what I remember.
Could be. Yeah, Tony, like
what would we do with our climbing lines when we thought they were unsafe to climb with? We'd downgrade them to a rigging line.
Right.
How stupid is that?
Yeah. It won't hold my 180-pound skinny ass, but I'll tie a 300-pound piece of wood to her every day.
That's exactly what we do. We downgrade our climbing lines to a rigging line. Figure that one out.
I know. I was the same. It just made sense. It was the lot. It was like the old motor oil was used for bar oil. That was the recycle program, man. Like it was on the same lines, and it just seemed like the right. It was just the way it was. I don't know. It's really odd. Maybe Tony, were you in the middle of that, Tony, or were you
right? I learned to climb as a teenager, so my dad working, and that was we didn't have locking snaps. I don't think I ever tied directly to a belt. And then when I started climbing professionally, working with my brother, I had a snap, but it wasn't a locking snap. I was right on that cusp of when carabiners were starting to come in, and I wasn't quite early enough to be on manila rope or 3-strand. It was still, safety blue was pretty entrenched. We had snaps, but they certainly weren't locking snaps. And carabiners were new. If you had a carabiner, that was pretty exciting. Yeah. And then, started out with a taut line, and then pretty quickly went to the Blakes, pretty quickly went in, within 4 or 5 years into split tail systems, and then the fair tending, slack tending pulleys underneath. And and that progression up and through, which happened. So I got right in on that end. But I remember as, teenager, I'd go to work with my dad and watch the guys climb, and they were just what you're describing, 3-strand tying right on, like just, it was just what you did. Like, no need to tie in until you get up there. So
that's right.
And it's not that it was just, they didn't have the tools or the techniques, right, to manage those things. I mean, I kind of equate it to like first time doing spar work. Like I didn't know anything about tying in with like a cinching or a choking, friction saver. We just sat on a lanyard and cut. I didn't know any other thing to do. Like, I wasn't clever enough to figure it out on my own. And then when people started showing me, I'm like, well, that's a good idea. That's going to be way easier and way less scary. Yeah. And adopted it from there.
Yeah, I think it was interesting, Tony, and we've talked about it a few times. I'm curious, Norm, how you think the internet and the Google trainer, the YouTube trainer model that exists now, it seems like you can really, you certainly can see how to do something. You may not see the best way or whatever, but you can find a lot of stuff out and sort of self-teach in a whole different way than when we were starting in the business, to say the least. And even, the working part of my career, even starting training, that didn't exist,
Oh yeah. Right.
Is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing? Where does that fit into these things, into the fray these days, Norm?
It depends on who is, on the other end of that camera. There are good things out there, and there are some painfully bad things out there. So, everybody says, yeah, I taught myself, I Googled it, and I learned how to do it. Well, yeah, did you learn the right way? Because there are, ways to do it right, and there are numerous ways to do it wrong. So, yeah it's a good thing and a bad thing, but it's just like,
I agree.
I Google chainsaw sharpening, or chain sharpening, and there's, all these different ways to sharpen a chain, and 99% of them are not the right way to do it.
Yep.
So
there seems to be a lot of porter wraps hooked up the wrong way.
Oh yeah, absolutely. To answer your question, there's good info out there, and there's some bad info out there, and climbers going to get hurt or killed.
I tell newer guys that ask me, or people get in the industry, I'm like, just don't use like YouTube and stuff like that. Don't use it as your first point of reference, right?
Yeah,
get experience from a person or a book or a verified source, and then use YouTube to back that up so that you have a frame of reference, so that, when you see that guy doing what we were doing 25 years ago, and we know now that it's not safe, don't be doing that. And I think, you need to differentiate between, there's a big difference between a bunch of guys in their backyard on the weekend doing silly tree stuff. And then there's, hey, here's some professionals, and we had this job and it was kind of challenging. Check out how we handled it. And then the next level would be, look, I'm going to teach you how to do this. And those are three very different things. And you can't confuse them, but it has definitely changed the dynamics of training, because you essentially have the YouTube trainer in the classroom with you now. It's somebody that you have to, it's like, well, I saw this on YouTube. It's like, Jesus, here we go again. But I tell them, don't use it as your first point of reference, right? Get a frame of reference that's verified, that you can trust, and then go to YouTube and say, oh, no, wait, that's not what Norm told me to do. That doesn't make sense, and then go from there.
Yeah, good point.
Norm, how would you say, like, being connected to training as long as you have been, and it's been a part of your arborist career, how has that impacted you in your career, your life, as just how has training, been part of that for you, would you say, like being connected to that part of the industry?
Being a trainer, you have to keep up with all the new techniques. You meet lots of people. You have to, in my opinion, you have to be passionate about it. You have to know what you're talking about. Different skill levels, you have to speak to the skill level of the person or persons you are training or instructing. There's just like I said before, going from commercial arborists to the other sector, you have to speak it to their level. Just keeping up on the new techniques. When I was on the ANSI committee, I was on the climbing, rigging, crane subcommittees. That was fantastic. I still sometimes get parts of that. I don't have any input anymore, but I get some input from other individuals. But yeah, just keeping up to date with the newer techniques, and I even enjoy attending other trainers' courses, like it's Tim Hart-thing. Who's the guy he's just a fantastic instructor. So you never can stop learning, in my opinion, and I just really enjoy it. Have a passion for it. Keeping up to date on new techniques. That's my input on that.
I find how many times can you take a course before you'd ever stop learning something? Even the same course. I think back to how many times you've actually delivered a course or even took a course while you were learning to deliver it. They're never the same way twice, and the learning just continues. And I think that's probably one of the things I've noticed in a real heart of a teacher is the ability to, like, you went and listened to Tim teach, you went and attended his seminar, and you learned something, and enjoyed it. The concept of, I've already taken it, why would I go again? Like, that just doesn't resonate with me somehow. I don't know why that is, but I've always been hey. Yeah. And
agreed.
Yeah. Well, we always seem to hit this time zone where this stage of the podcast or the discussion where it seems to be like a natural break for things. And I just want to thank you, Norm, for taking your time and sharing. It was a cool little history on the porter wrap, and great talk about splicing. We even moved into the some of the history development of climbing, and I don't go back as far as you where you had the paint can on the scabbard. I find it fascinating. I don't know when it was, but it was well on in my career when I discovered, working with Buckingham, it came up as to why the little clip is on the scabbard. Why there's that little clip, and they were like, well, geez, it's just always been on there. And we figured out eventually that it was to hold the damn paint can.
Yep.
And they just never bothered taking it off because nobody used the paint can anymore, but that snap stayed on there, and they finally started leaving them off because they weren't being used anymore, but no one got the memo.
Yeah, right.
And I've always found that quite fascinating. Who knows what the next
good old Dr. Shigo.
What's that?
Some good old Dr. Shigo.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And I mean, and you would have had opportunity to speak in Shigo as well, eh?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, he actually came to our shop.
Wow.
Did a presentation. Yeah, that was very entertaining. The guy was a very dynamic speaker, for sure.
Yeah.
Got his autograph in his book.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's too bad we can't have a sit down with Dr. Shigo anymore.
Yeah, really. Amen.
Well, I know you've got a company coming, and it 'tis the season. So Thanks again, Norm. Merry Christmas
thank you so much.
and happy holidays. And, at some point, we'll have to say goodbye.
Yeah, thanks, Norm. It's been great chatting with you.
Yeah, thanks for the invite. Merry Christmas to you two gentlemen, and happy holidays. And make it a safe holiday weekend, or safe holiday.
All right, thanks, Norm.
Absolutely, you too, Norm. Thanks so much.
Enjoy your time in Florida.
Florida.